Hello, hello. Wow, people are joining from everywhere. Whoa, okay, nice. Welcome, everybody. We'll wait a couple of minutes just for all of you to join. Wow. We are going to be talking about a hot button topic, taboos. And man, so many of you already began to interact with us when we asked you about what are some of those big no-nos that yes, we're also live on Facebook and Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. We'll go everywhere. Right now we're not on Instagram, but just wherever you need to find me, I will be, right? Hey, everyone, welcome. And thanks for joining me for Letters from Esther Live. So every month I write a newsletter, and every month I do a conversation about this newsletter so that we can have the lived experience. And this newsletter is a series that I write to help you reflect, to act, and to develop greater confidence and relational intelligence in all your relationships. The series itself is on YouTube and on Facebook Live. And if you want any more information about Letters from Esther, just go directly to estherperel.com/blog. And I invite you to join me every month here. I also would love for you to go make sure that you have pen and paper with you or the notebook that we introduced last time. Any of you have that notebook already ready? Great. If not, go get pen and paper. And if there's anyone that you think should join you because you think it would be good for them, or you think that you would like to have a chat with them afterwards so that you have a partner in crime here, then just go and reach out to them. Consider bringing in your friends into our conversations. And then you've got a live chat box. Submit your questions. We're going to be talking together throughout this hour, but I definitely want to hear from you. And if you want a copy of the slides that I'm going to be using, this is a new feature that we have. Find the link in the description below so you can actually take those slides with you and go and continue these exercises, these conversations by yourself, with your friends, with your loved ones, etc. The topic of today is, are taboos holding your relationships back? Are taboos holding your relationships back? Let's start and let's define what is a taboo, and how might they be holding you back in your relationships. So a taboo, it's the forbidden, it's the prohibited, it's the restrictions. It's anything that is unacceptable, that can pertain to what you eat, what you wear, who you marry, how you have sex, what you do, what you can or cannot say. Taboos have been there throughout civilization. They've been imposed upon us by religion, by society, by your families. They typically are there to create social order, to create boundaries, and to create group cohesion. There are other things, but those are probably three very important features of why we have these fundamental prohibitions, restrictions, objections, things that are unacceptable. And interestingly, when I asked you on Instagram yesterday, what are some of those big no-nos that you grew up with? I mean, hundreds of you poured out precisely, immediately what are some of those big master rules that are right there and that you are not to break, but it's really anything that has been deemed fundamentally unacceptable, about eating pork, or about eating cow, or about drinking alcohol, or about marrying outside the faith, or about naming your child after someone is deceased, or about adultery, or about touching yourself, or about showing any flesh above the knee, above the elbow, etc. And they are it's so enforced with clear threats, these taboos, throughout history, that the consequences have often been really dramatic. You break them, and you would face the wrath of God, not getting into the desired afterlife, massive judgment or public shaming or a scarlet letter, family rejection, family funerals about you, excommunication, being ostracized, or a way old system being put in an asylum. So, breaking taboos, which people have done throughout, has always come with major freedom and also sometimes dire consequences. When I asked you and you answered me en masse about what are some of those big no-nos in your own lives, I just want to name a few because it was really gripping to read so many and to be also able to see where was the religion, where was the culture, where was the family, where was you. You said ending a relationship means that you failed. Sex is bad unless you're a woman and you're married to a man, and then it becomes a duty. Talking about feelings, showing your feelings. Parents are always right. If you're not in a well-paid job, you're not successful in life. What will people think? Or, in other words, what will the neighbors say? If you're not a virgin as marriage, you're wasted good. In my culture, you're not to think, expect, or utter the words that suggest someone's death. Showing skin. Women should serve men no matter what. Everything about sex, periods, boyfriends, it all was taboo. Menstruation, never talked about. Homosexuality, never talked about. And I knew I was gay while I was in a religion that strictly forbids it. Knowing what else? Disability, illness, anything about mental health, masturbation, public displays of affection, that therapy equaled weakness or lunacy. We were taught everything about reproduction and biology, but we never spoke about desire, sex, or intimacy. That one came back in so many variations. I mean, everything having to do with sexuality. I would say the big winner was sexuality. Marrying outside my religion. Question to you, where do these taboos come from? But question just to think in a minute, we're going to do a whole exercise about this. I mean, historically, taboos served utilitarian purposes. Social order, boundaries, group cohesion, who's in, who's out. And some of the taboos, such as bestiality or incest or pedophilia or premarital sex, remain important fixed boundaries. But other taboos actually change as cultures evolve. Interfaith marriages, interracial marriages, homosexuality, and in some parts of the world, premarital sex, the very same one that is so forbidden elsewhere. Until 1973, homosexuality was considered a pathology in the DSM, the Diagnostic Psychiatric Manual. It was first a sin, and then when secularization arrived, it became a pathology until 1987, when homosexuality was completely taken out of the DSM. And that doesn't mean that there are still not reformed treatments out there for people who are gay. I mean, it's not like it's been accepted by the population at large, but pathologically removing it as such from the diagnostic manual, 1987. I think most of us probably no, that's not true. I would say that you were born, but that's not true. Not at all. To me, that seems very recent anyway. I think it is very recent. But just to say how something that was so prohibited, hidden, secret, veiled, shamed, that's an example of its history. So it changes not just in your mind, it changes at the doctor's office, it changes in the population, in the culture, in the marriage registries. I mean, when you see the history of a taboo, it is really massive. And the history of a taboo that is undone is the history of a society, basically. We acquired a lot more freedom in the last decades with a growing amount of individualism, But with that, we got liberated from taboos, and we also often are in search of the new rules, and we have to establish those rules ourselves, because we do sometimes, we left unmoored. Okay, I know all these things I disagree with, now I can do, but now I need to figure out, well, then what do I want to do? Where do I stand vis-a-vis all of this? If I don't have institutional no-nos, I have to come up with my own moral code. And that is a major, major task for many of us at this moment. No, there's a French philosopher, Foucault, who talked about the panopticon, which is that tower that you have in the jail that looks and circles, and it sees you all the time. Even when you don't know that it's looking at you, it looks at you. And what he was talking about is that we today are living with the panopticon on the inside. If we no longer are controlled by authoritarian institutions, we have to constantly control ourselves. And I think for a great deal of aspects of our lives, we have never dealt with more of these questions of inner control, you know. And that means creating our own codes. Many of you were immediately saying taboos are passed down through our families. That's true. They're passed down through our schools. You know, young girls, you know, are told not to wear miniskirts in certain parts of the world. It will distract the boys, you know, and you will be viewed as a slut. It is passed down at a job. Don't date a coworker. You will be viewed as unprofessional. From parties that you attend, certainly don't go to a party and start discussing politics or religion. And these taboos become all these codes by which we need to live by. I think social media is filled with taboos, you know, of what you can show, what looks good, what speaks about how well you're doing versus all the stuff that you are not to mention. You know, we experience our taboos particularly, I would say, not primarily, but particularly in our close relationships. And I would say there are three main areas: death, money, and sex, that I would like to focus on, that I think really kind of a lot goes right there, you know. And in fact, your answers kind of confirm that as well. And I'm going to do a whole conference on this in November, on those forbidden conversations about death, sex, and money. So it's very tough to talk about them. Have you ever felt that you couldn't share any fantasy with your partner because the very thing that you may desire would completely turn them off and they would find that a taboo? Have you ever strained a relationship with a friend because you were discussing money? Have you ever lived with the regret of not having better planned for a loved one's death because you were afraid to talk about their death as they were dying? I mean, I don't think any of us can locate ourselves outside of any of these conversations. So, paper, pen, or notebook. We're going to start first exercise. I want you to identify one taboo in your life. If you answered it yesterday, feel free to just pick the same one or others, but pick one taboo and actually write the word taboo at the top of your page. Just one, you know, you can redo it afterwards with others, you know. Death, sex, or money. Which is the biggest taboo for you? If you want to use that frame, it's easier. If you want to go for one that's completely yours, really, I'm not the school teacher here. You know, what is specific about this taboo? And you know that it's a taboo because it will be unmistakable for its quality of intriguing forbiddenness. That's taboo. Underneath the word taboo, identify for yourself society, family, individual, and relationship. So, for example, society. What did society tell you about this taboo? Your church taught you that homosexuality was a sin. In your community, we do not talk about money because not everybody has any. In your school health class, you were taught masturbation was disgusting and has served absolutely no biological function, so what's the point? If it's your family, what did your family pass on about this taboo? They rejected you as you came out gay, or they rejected anyone else that you knew, that your neighbors became distant when your family made some more money and you bought a nicer car, or that you made fun out of someone when you found out that they had tried masturbation. Individual, how has this taboo played out for you personally? in your own life, when you wanted to experiment something sexually and you kind of completely held it back and never mentioned it, when you hesitated to apply for promotions because you don't want anybody to think that you're any better than anybody else, or when you felt shame in masturbation, individually. And then lastly, how did it affect you in your relationships with your friends or with your loved ones or partner or partners? Never told my partner that I wanted to bring in a same-sex partner. I hold myself back. I struggle to be happy for my partner's professional success because I don't dare push myself. Which is it? And just write one thing for each one. Society, family, yourself, your relationships. And by now, you probably should be seeing that we live and we love within a highly complex and layered set of rules of what is right and what is wrong. Send me some of your answers. I want to see them. Share with me so I have some idea of where you're landing on this. Death, sex, and money. Which one is the taboo for you? The big one. I'm going to wait as they arrive. But, some of your rules you've inherited, and some of these rules you've actually established yourself, Maybe you're learning that your partner's childhood rules about premarital sex contributed to the shame that they feel around having sex. But maybe the very same rules that they experienced around premarital sex is what made sex so hot when it was forbidden and so dull now that it is a must. So things get a different meaning, even though the taboo may have been the same. The consequences change. Everybody, me included, we bring a legacy of taboos into our relationship, So interesting. Death is a big one. And half of you say that death is the number one, and half of you say that sex is the number one. Death, what? You can't talk about it. It can't be mentioned. If you speak it, it's as if you bring it closer. It's as if you're saying to someone, I'm waiting for you to go. What is it about speaking about death to living people that feels like impossible? And then if that's the death we can't talk about, what do we do with the death that people commit themselves, that they choose to inflict upon themselves? So I'm gonna just wait and get a few more. But for me, I think taboo, forbidden, I think avoidance, boundaries, fear, stigma, shame, and even disinformation. Those are some of the words, images, associations that I have to the word taboo. And they accompany me in my relationships, where I start to feel like, I cannot do something like this, that it feels like I have a whole scaffolding that I need to first loosen up in order to be able to access those things, depression, divorce, non-monogamy, bisexuality, younger men, talking about women. No, not women, talking about money, of course. Death, my dad is uncomfortable talking through the details of what he would want to happen to him, various worst case medical scenarios, interracial relationships, of course, man, the list is really, really long when you think about it, at a time where people are constantly exhorting us, do what you want, figure out what is important to you, find your purpose and all of that. Man, first of all, we have to go through the tunnel of all these restrictions and prohibitions because they loom really, really large. So next time your partner does something that feels unfathomable, instead of just, how could you think this or say this or want this or act like that? Maybe you actually ask a question. That's the first thing, right? Because the way we enforce taboos is with judgment, with threat, with fear that you're going to be rejected, that you're going to be shamed publicly, that you're going to not be loved. It's that. So this is what happens in our relationships. Instead, ask them where they learned that. How did it become such a thing that is acceptable to them? Or how did it become a thing that is so unacceptable to them? Ask yourself the same question, by the way. Next time you want to go deeper with a friend, consider really probing a taboo topic. How could you vote for him? No. What makes you want to vote for him? What makes you think that this is the better option for you? How is it that, you managed to be with a younger man after all? What would it mean for you that you're not going to be with this person you want to be with because in your head somebody told you, no good, younger man, you're good, not having kids, no good, no good not having kids, shame on you, staying in a marriage after infidelity, big one, big one. My TED talk addressed this whole subject about the new shame. My book, The State of Affairs, I talked about it too. How shameful should you feel when you choose to stay now that you have the option to leave, lady? Because that's really a lady thing, though I think it's actually even more challenging for men. You're weak, you have no self-esteem, you let yourself be trampled on, you must go, because this thing, once it happens, will happen again, and you are weak for staying, rather than you're actually maybe committed and strong and courageous and determined for staying. That would be a different perspective, right? All of these, yeah? Afraid to make a will. If you make a will, it means you're mortal. It means that you actually know that you're not going to be here forever and that you accept that you will die. And so many people resist doing any planning of any sort, any critical conversations for end of life, any of it, just because it's an omen, it's like you're bringing it closer by just sheerly mentioning it. Money, the tackiness, the crassness of talking about money, of course, So question number 2, there's so many, I think the not having kids is a big one. The staying after infidelity is a big one. The talking about feelings when that is not allowed. Anything that is seen as weak, basically. All of these are variations on weakness, right? Or on moral corruption or moral, emptiness and things like that. Exercise number 2. And this is in preparation for the Q&A, because I think we're going to have lots to talk about in a minute, You have your biggest no-no, or maybe you have another one that you want to actually take a look at. So write that one down. Big, big no-no. And then what are some of the beliefs that accompany this no-no? The whole upholding of it, and what happens if you actually break it? What would it say about you if you don't follow the rule? So go in both directions. What is it? And what beliefs accompany it? And what role has it played in your relationships? What role did it play in your relationships that your parents said, be successful, but never told you a thing about how to get there? Or that your parents said, our childhood is off topic. We don't ever discuss that. That's a no-no. Or, you as a woman, you are there to serve men. That's a clear message. And anything else is a no-no. You're selfish. You're going to lose yourself. Don't be too smart. That was one I grew up with, by the way, is don't be too smart. A man doesn't want to stay with a smart woman. He wants a woman who makes him feel good. I had lots of those messages myself growing up, what are some of the taboos that you broke, and I know I went to school. I was kind of the first to go to college in the family. And I knew my mother was proud, but also really scared. The idea was smart women stay spinster, basically. No, they won't find partners. It's too threatening. So underplay it, But at the same time, she was very proud when I did it. It was filled with double messages like this. This is what I'm trying to say. It's not always so black and white. You get the official message, and then you get the ambivalence of the parent vis-a-vis the very message that they've been giving you, right? How do you talk about non-normative sexual experiences, particularly same-sex, particularly multiple partners? I just did a fantastic conversation with Justin Lee Miller. It's on Sessions as well on my website. And where he talked about what are the most common fantasies, multiple partners being one of them, same-sex partners being one of them. And they are actually universal. They're quite global. It's not just here in the US and all of that. but they are the most unspoken ones, of course, right? Because it instantly means I'm not enough. It means you're thinking about other people. It means you're not monogamous. It means you may cheat on me, all of that stuff. It means you are insatiable. It means you are greedy. Can you admit to cheating? How would you bring up some of your fantasies? And if you have a dispute with somebody around money, can you bring it up? When people owe you money, do you remind them? Can you ask them? When your parents have given money in an unfair way or in an uneven way and distributed it in ways that you would like to discuss, can you bring it up? What's the conversation about money at work, with your boss, with your colleague? Do you live in a company where people know what other people are making, or is this a completely secret thing and nobody knows what other people make, and so you are constantly having to guess and figure it out and all of that, right? So take a quick look at these questions. You click on the link and get the slide and take it with you. This is a good dinner conversation, by the way. It's a good evening to spend. I could take a few hours on this one, just myself. Can you talk to someone who is dying about death? I think when my mother was sick, I definitely couldn't. I was there and I was trying to make her stand and walk and fight the way that she had always been a fighter. And she basically was telling me, I don't want to fight anymore. And I just couldn't accept it. I couldn't just accept that she was saying, I have enough. I've done my part and I'm ready to go. Or I don't want to go, but I don't want to fight. And we never talked about it, So I know it personally. That means that I then don't do it as a professional, and then I need to learn to do it. And then that's how I keep growing. That's how I keep learning and how I evolve here with you and in my work with my patients, So don't think I have it all figured out, is what I'm trying to say. I really don't. All these questions are super relevant to me, Definitely which taboo I broke was premarital sex. That's a given, that I came from a tradition that certainly did not value that. And really it was meant to protect the woman, right? It wasn't meant to oppress her, but de facto it did that, right? So let's go. Start asking me questions. Let's ask each other questions. Let's talk a little bit together. We have quite a good amount of time to really plunge in this, there is, of course, let's go. Start sending me the questions, but I was thought of another one, right? Being a mistress, that was a taboo. That's a big no-no. I mean, the woman in the shadow, right? The woman that destroys the house, right? And then, tabooed sexuality. To my body, let me read this thing. My body and my experiences were not my own. How do we change the paradigm that we have in our heads? What if you lacked boundaries and taboos growing up? Great second question. Let me go with first. How do we change the paradigm you have in your head? Look, I think you don't do this doesn't happen like that at once. You come closer. You question your values. You question your beliefs, depending on where in the world you live as well. I mean, there are plenty of parts in the world where children are not to think differently from their parents. One generation follows exactly in the steps of the second generation. And that is not about what do I think about this. This is about how am I supposed to think about this. So really, this question, you have to put it in context, first and foremost. But I do know that, many of you are living in between cultures. Many of you are living with some values about certain things that are very Western, very urban, very individualistic, and then other things that remain very anchored in a tradition, in a religion, in a community, in a family. So I don't think that all of us here are just one thing. And that often means that you surround yourself with people that reinforce certain beliefs, certain practices, certain customs. If you don't want to eat pork, well, don't go to a barbecue necessarily, or make it clear when you go to the barbecue that you don't eat pork. Are you okay being alone that doesn't eat the pork? Or do you go with a few people? Or do you go with people who generally don't eat pork or meat? Or, the same idea is like, do you create communities where there is room for difference? Or do you create communities where you actually need people who support your beliefs? who don't think that because you have premarital sex, who don't think that because you are homosexual, who don't think that because you have stayed in a relationship or you have not stayed in a relationship, or you have had children or you haven't had children. It's every single one of these can be, a taboo. So do you stay in places that reinforce change, or do you stay with people and places that reinforce status quo? I think that's the first question about how you begin to change the paradigm in your head. Check on that. What if you grew up in a house without rules? That's neglect. Because we need rules and taboos in order to break them. You need to have a frame, and then you can decide to go outside of the frame. But without a frame, we become rudderless. We need boundaries. We need a sense of containment. So often, some of us create some of our own rules. That's what we do. We create our own rules, our own taboos, or we embrace taboos and frames and from others, belief system, religions of others, in order to have that kind of scaffolding. I don't think taboos are either good or bad. They are foundational, pieces of any culture, any system. My partner doesn't seem to believe in talking about feelings. It's a big deal for me to be able to communicate. We are mixed race and have a big age gap. How do I find a language that works for us? But your partner communicates to you all the time. So that's the first thing. And sometimes I don't tell you I like you. I just bring you your tea to bed. But it means I'm thinking about you, I'm caring, I'm liking you. So that is a feeling. It is a feeling that isn't expressed in words. Don't mix the fact that if it's not spoken, it means that it's not communicated. Then you can say, it's very funny that you are thinking that this is not something we should talk about, because you picked a partner who loves to talk about it. And if you really didn't want to talk about it, you wouldn't have picked me. So, even if it wasn't conscious. And then you bring some humor into this. Like, obviously you may say that you don't do this, but you wouldn't be with me if it was clearly something that you were utterly not interested in. It may not be something you're familiar with. It may not be something you know. So let's talk about that. And don't try to make him like you or her, whatever this was. Taboo section. Okay. How do you heal the hurt from breaking a taboo with my mother, leaving family, religion, sex, interracial marriage, no kids? Wow, you broke a lot of the taboos. You broke a lot of the wishes for your mother as well. And there are two things that come immediately to mind. One is you basically, you tell your mom, there's something that you also taught me, which was to have integrity. Or there's something that you taught me, which was to listen to my heart, or to find good people. And I did that too. And in marrying this person, maybe the person is not from our clan, but I promise you, I acted with integrity, and I acted in good faith of finding someone that I respect and honor. And those values came from you as well. So it's not because I didn't land in exactly the same place as you wanted that I didn't actually bring with me some of the most important values that you have given me. Start with that. That is often much different than to think my kid rebelled, my kid didn't do anything that I expected. But it's not true. You see, it's that you often have used the very things that she wanted, but it landed somewhere else. So, oh God, I love that question, and I would talk about this quite a bit. How can we overcome the shame that comes with an internalized taboo? You talk to yourself a lot. You have an adult in you that talks to the other one and says, when I do this, I feel really terrible. I feel like I'm doing something I was never meant to do. I feel like this is something that was so off limit. I can't believe. And then you say, you breathe through it, and you literally talk to yourself and you reassure yourself, this is a choice I'm making. It is really weird. I feel like I'm going far out of left field. That is so not me, or not what I was meant to do, or so I feel alone. I need support. I need other people who think about this with me. But don't just say whatever you do is great, who actually respect the conflict. You don't want to eradicate the conflict. There is charge in that conflict. It means that you come from something, that you leave something, that there is loss involved, that there is trepidation. Yes, that is what happens when we break taboos. That is not something to avoid. That's the thing. you know um, how do I talk to my partner about topic that he sees as taboo but I don't? Tough. you know Give me a quick example, of like what. And just to say, we don't talk often about this. We don't often talk about money. We don't often talk about, your illness. We don't talk about the fact that both your parents died very young. We don't talk, I can see why that would be challenging for you. Instead of, it's very important that we should be able to talk about it, start by, tell me what is so dangerous, scary, off limit for you about that. And tell me something. You probably knew, back to the same example from before, that I was quite open about things like that. How was that for you in the beginning? My sense is that when one person picks someone who is fundamentally doing something else, it's because there's a part of them that would access that as well. Maybe not as much, but certainly as well. How do you recognize the limiting beliefs born from taboos? How to challenge them? Listen, every taboo is a rule, but not every rule is a taboo. Taboo are really mega. They're big rules. They are there. If you break them, you really shake up the social order. If you marry outside your faith, outside your race, if you leave your village, if you don't follow in the footstep of your father, if you you break tradition, it feels like a crack in history, family history or cultural history. That's the weight of taboos. That's why when people say, I dread it, I'm feeling such a knot in my stomach. Of course you do. Of course you do. How to recognize, are some taboos useful? Yeah, yes, of course. And they change as well, right? I mean, the taboo of bestiality, the taboo of pedophilia, the taboo of incest. Yes, they were useful. They are still useful. They're useful. I mean, often they are to protect, often they are to curtail violence, often they are to create cohesion, often they are to make very clear roles in society. Only the priests can go to the temple. There's a hierarchy. It is forbidden for the common mortal to go to the temple. It is forbidden to have an animal sacrifice with an animal that has a blemish, because you want perfection when you go to give a gift to God. So yes, of course there is use. They are highly utilitarian, actually. They are defined by their usefulness. But usefulness is a term itself that changes throughout history. That's the other thing. My God, so many questions. How do I talk with people about their taboos if it makes them uncomfortable? First of all, it makes them uncomfortable. You acknowledge it. It really is uncomfortable to talk about taboos. That is. It's in the nature of the beast. You don't try to have them not be uncomfortable. Partly what we're doing here is, in the conversation, some of you may have gotten more comfortable. You started out super tense, but now you actually say, I want to go talk with such and such about that. And when they are uncomfortable, you say, yes, it does. It's really uncomfortable to talk about things that we are not meant to ever mention. Of course, it's uncomfortable. The first time you go and you talk with other people about their salaries, it's uncomfortable because you've never done it. You've never known it. Some of us have been lucky to live in more transparent cultures. But, the first time that we actually went and talked with our father, how much money do you have for, so that I know how much I need to put aside to take care of you when you get older? That is a really tough conversation to have. Don't try not to be uncomfortable. Accept it. There's not much, and then that's the first thing. Then as you continue to do it, you will become slightly more comfortable, depending on the reaction, of course, of the others. How can we lean into being open with taboos if we fear they can be harmful? I'm going to come back to that because I think that there's more in this question. My partner doesn't believe in talking about his feeling. We did that. My ex-partner is pushy sexually. I like it. But it makes me feel unsafe and unheard. Morally and intellectually, I know I should not be into it. So I ended it. But I still want this person sexually. So if I understood you well, you were turned on by something that at another level you thought is not good for me. It's not the way I should be in this relation. And by the way, you can have an aggressive partner who wants to experiment and not feel unsafe or unheard. So you could feel unsafe or unheard with all kinds of partners. This the fact that your partner wasn't so interested in listening to you, in checking in with you, in knowing if you like it, who was constantly trying to convince you, why don't you want to do this? We should do this. This is a great thing to do. And then make you feel bad about your limits or made you shamed or all of that. That's a whole other thing. And you ask yourself, what was the turn on after all? Is it the fact that he was so attentive to you on some other level, that he so wanted it with you? And did you really feel like it was about you? So yes, it is not uncommon that we experience a certain level of excitement, even for something that on some level we feel also doesn't feel right and doesn't feel good. It's both ends. And that is for you to figure out this little knot. I have cheated on my boyfriend and accepted in front of him too, but I'm not being able to accept myself. I've been almost 6 months. So low points, working on it. Look, this is a very interesting thing. It's like, why? So you ask yourself, what is it that I am not accepting in myself? What do I think this behavior said about me? What sense do I make out of this? What meaning does this thing have for me? How did I get there? Is it because there's a part of me that thinks this could happen again? Is it because there's some part of me that says, I can't believe I did this. This is so not like me. This was beyond anything I would ever do or accept anybody else to do. Is it that this lack of acceptance of yourself is actually creating boundaries for you so that you're held in check? Sometimes it takes 2 years, by the way. Doesn't matter if it's 6 months, but you do want to ask yourself, what is it that I'm struggling with? What's the conflict? What am I not accepting? And is there a part of you that feels like your partner's acceptance is premature? That's another piece that we don't often ask ourselves, actually. My mom is terminally ill, but she won't talk about her final days. I would like to ensure she gets the best end of life, but can't do it without her being open about it. Not sure I should push the discussion. Don't talk to her about death then. Talk with her about how she wants to live those next few months, or what she needs at this moment, or how you can make her more comfortable. Remember this, how you want to die says a lot about how you want to live. So talk to her about how she wants to live. That will tell you about how she wants to die. It's the reverse, same question. Rather than tell her, Mom, you don't have that many months left or that many weeks left, we should discuss it. I mean, I think that would be great. Don't misunderstand me, but I'm not sure if she's too scared, then you need to talk about the anxiety, and you can talk about how anxious you feel and how sad you feel and how much you dread the thought of possibly missing her. Talk about you. Don't talk about her necessarily. What's your piece of advice now as an experienced psychologist? After your experience with your mother, do you consider important to talk about death with a dying parent? Is it important for both parts or more for us as kids to share the parents' feeling before the separation? What I can tell you is certainly COVID pushed me and my husband to start to talk with our children about critical conversations for end of life. And that's not just ventilators and respirators. We were guided by Sarah Campbell, who's also on the faculty at Sessions, which is my training platform that you can find all the info about on the website. And she guided us how to talk with the kids, because it's not just we don't want to talk. The kids also don't want to talk with us necessarily about the fact that we may not be around. This may happen. There is a pandemic. We should really talk about who will be there. And it's really not just the will. It's not about the material goods that you are dividing. That's one piece. Then there are the conversations about how you want to be treated, what you're prepared to do and what not. And then there's the conversation about what's your legacy. So I have learned to speak about it more. And I spoke about it more with my father, who passed away 5 years after my mother. And so I had already learned that. But it's dyadic. My mother didn't want to talk about it either, and so I didn't. My father brought it up, and so I did as well. You see, you're not always all alone in making that decision. I'm single and happy, but my family doesn't understand. How can I communicate this to them? What do you do when partners have different ideas about what should be taboo? Okay, that's a different thing. So, look, last one. You make a life choice that is very different from your parents, that makes them feel like you have landed in a place that, in their mind, in their value system, is a dead end, or is a place that is not a good place for a child, or not a good place for a woman, or not a good place for a man, etc. And you need to tell them, I completely understand that for you, that seems like a sad ending or a sad landing. I don't, and I hope that sooner or later you'll be able to see some of that with me, so that you're not mourning for me and making me continuously feel like there's something missing in me or wrong in my choice and so forth, and that I should be continuously, in awake rather than awake. But you saying to them, I'm fine, only reinforces their belief that you're not. You're saying to them, I can see why you would think that I'm not fine. From where you come from, and at your time, this would have been a really sad choice. I get it. There's a lot of parents who had that and still have that very first reaction when they learn that their child is gay. It's like, it's dangerous. It's a sad life. You won't have a family. You won't have children. And of course, many of these things have changed in some parts of the world. But many parents, this is what they grew up with because it was reality. So find the reality in your parents' fear. All right, people, there's many, many more, but I can't address them right now. So I'm here to help you have the conversations that are hard to start. I hope we did some of that today. But remember, we've only dipped our toe into this topic today. Actually, I'm going to have a whole conference on it very soon. You'll hear about that. Detonating a taboo will cause all hell to break loose. Just as the fact, if it happens, you deal with it. You confront the fears, you welcome the conflict. It's part of it. The limits and the consequences of your freedom are always involved in this. And if you do this with your partner, remember that increasing intimacy can look like breaking a taboo. That is a piece of this. Or it can look like rediscovering and reinforcing boundaries that make your partner feel more comfortable. So it goes in both directions. Super important, this piece. And it's about finding where the lines are in the sand for you. Sometimes you'll cross them, and sometimes you'll come to understand why they're important for you to maintain, and you don't want to cross them. Don't go for the peer pressure. That's it. Just, but a moral compass is something that develops over time. So give yourself that time. Think about it, talk about it, challenge yourself, try it, change, be a flexible person that's alive, that adapts, that changes. That's it, So thanks for joining me. This is Letters from Esther Live. It follows my monthly newsletter that you find on estherperel.com/blog. It's the conversation about the newsletter that gives us the possibility to be together here, live, lived experience, talking to each other. Be well. Talk to you soon, next month, same time, same place. Bye.